Plagiarism is bad, okay?
Hey, this screencast will be an introduction to plagiarism. We will define it and see if you can recognize it. What is plagiarism? To plagiarize means to steal and pass off the ideas or words of another as your own, to use another person's production without crediting the source, to commit literary theft, to present as new and original an idea or product that was derived from an existing source. In other words, plagiarism is an act of fraud. It involves both stealing someone else's work and lying about it afterwards. Can words and ideas really be stolen? The United States Congress says yes. Original ideas are considered intellectual property and are therefore protected by copyright laws, similar to inventions. Article 1, Section 8 of the U.S. Constitution gives Congress express authority to grant authors and inventors exclusive rights to their own creation. The Article 1, Section 8 of the Constitution states to promote the progress of science and useful arts by securing for limited times to authors and inventors the exclusive right to their respective writings and discoveries. So that's the clause that protects what we call intellectual property of an individual. Let's talk about deliberate versus accidental plagiarism. Deliberate plagiarism, some examples include copying and pasting, rewriting information from books, articles, websites, etc., buying, downloading, or borrowing a paper, and recycling an old paper for a new assignment. Accidental plagiarism is not knowing when and how to cite the information you use, or not knowing how to paraphrase and summarize the information you're using. Regardless of whether or not you deliberately plagiarize or accidentally plagiarize, it doesn't really matter. When researching a paper, you are expected to know how to do it and how to present the information correctly. If you don't, you need to ask. Don't assume that you're doing it correctly. What are the consequences of plagiarism? At St. John, the consequences of plagiarism as stated in the handbook is an immediate suspension, no credit on an assignment, and it could be a combination of no credit, detention, suspension, and expulsion. In college, the consequences could be any of these examples: reprimanding the student and requiring a revision of the paper, lowering the grade to an F, withdrawal from the class, failure of the course, or a referral to the dean for suspension or dismissal from the school. In the real world, although I don't know where else we're living, these are some examples of people who have had actual instances where plagiarism has ruined their careers. So, for example, this author had to resign from the Pulitzer Prize board after she was accused of plagiarism. So that's one example. You might be more familiar with the example of Brian Williams, the journalist from NBC who was suspended from his career for exaggerating his role in a news story in Iraq. which would be considered plagiarism or lying, at least lying about his information. Another case, a college student was required to pay $26,000 in damages after being found guilty of plagiarism in court. So there are sometimes fines associated with plagiarism. And lastly, your integrity will be lost if you are accused of plagiarism because no one will trust you. Who does plagiarism hurt? Plagiarism hurts you because you aren't understanding and learning the proper research habits and disciplining yourself in the correct techniques. It hurts the integrity of us as a school or the school in which you are attending at the time, if and when that sort of behavior is tolerated. It also hurts other students because that student who decides to plagiarize is competing at an unfair advantage and cheating. And it also hurts the original author because their ideas are now attributed to someone else besides themselves, and that could have a negative impact on their career. So how do you avoid plagiarism? You can avoid plagiarism by quoting, summarizing, and paraphrasing information from your sources, and giving credit to that author by citing the information. Everything that is not your own words or ideas must include a citation. In later videos, we're going to talk about specifically how we cite information. For now, it's important to know that everything that is not your words or ideas must include a citation. Here's a little graphic to sort of go through if you need to cite it or not. So if you're using your own words and it's your own ideas, then that does not need to be cited. If you're using your own words, but it's not your ideas and you're going to paraphrase it, you do need to cite that. If you are not using your own words, you need to put it in quotation marks. If not, that is considered plagiarism. If they are not your own words and you do need to put it in quotation marks and you cite it, then you would be fine. Okay, so let's look at some examples and see if you can recognize plagiarism. So on the left is an original example from the source, and on the right is what the student put in their paper. Would you consider this plagiarism? Yes, obviously this is direct plagiarism because the student didn't change any of the words. This is a direct quote, and if you use this in your paper, it needs quotation marks around it and a citation. Example 2. Notice that the structure of the student version is exactly the same as the structure of the original. The student only changed the words by replacing the original with synonyms. That is not acceptable. That is considered plagiarism. If you are using information from a source, you're not only supposed to change the words, but the structure of the information as well. This one is exactly like example 2. So notice that the structure is exactly the same except for the words or synonyms. So that would be considered plagiarism and is not acceptable. And example 4. This is not an example of plagiarism. This is a good example of how a student took the original information and paraphrased the information, changing the sentence structure and the words of the sentence to create a new sentence for their paper.